Law 578, Law of Evidence 2, Character Evidence, Lecture 1. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi to everybody. Okay, in this lecture, we are going to look at character evidence. Character evidence under the Evidence Act is basically provided for under Section 52 to Section 55 of the Evidence Act. So the content of our discussion will be to look into the meaning of character evidence, the use of character evidence in civil cases, the use of character evidence in criminal proceedings, and character evidence under other provisions of the Evidence Act. Now, what is character evidence? Can we tender character evidence as evidence relevant in the court or not? Now, as a general rule, right? As a general rule, character evidence here is not relevant and not admissible as evidence produced in the court. Right? This is provided for the case, the principle of law is provided for through the case of R.N. Whitmore, because it was stated that the business of the court is to try the case and not the man, and even a very bad man has a righteous case. Now, what does it mean? It means that if you are a person of bad character, in the sense that you could be a very mean person, you could always like to visit maybe a prostitute, you may be very not a filial son, you may like to scold people, you are not going, this character of yours will not going to be tendered in court to prove that you commit a crime. There is a distinction between character of a person and criminal action. That is why when you look into this concept of character evidence, even a prostitute can claim rape. Because as a general rule, offense of a crime is very distinct from character of a person. Now, what is therefore a character evidence? Now, character evidence is actually been explained under in explanation to Section 55. If you refer to explanation to Section 55, it says that explanation in Sections 52, 53, 54, and 55, the word character includes both reputation and disposition, but except as provided in Section 54, evidence may be given only of general reputation and general disposition and not of a particular act by which reputation or disposition is shown. So basically, right, is basically when we talk about character evidence, under explanation to Section 55, there are two kinds of situation or two kinds of characteristic that may be regarded to fall within character evidence. The first one is actually reputation, right? Reputation is regarded as character under explanation to Section 55. Now, what is reputation? Reputation is actually referring to what people sees of you. So it is something that is settled. What the public sees of you, you are a very charismatic leader, you are a very good manager. This will be what the people perceived of you, and this is what your reputation is. Say, for example, you have the singer Siti Nurhaliza. Siti Nurhaliza is known to be a very respectful singer. Everybody in Malaysia finds that she's a very respectful singer. She did not have very bad behavior, so that is her reputation. Now, reputation here is something that people perceive of you. It is settled, the public also have acknowledged that, and basically rumors are not reputation because rumors is not settled, right? Now, another kind of situation or another kind of thing that may be regarded as character is when you are talking about disposition. Now, what is disposition? Disposition is referring to how an individual behaves. It refers to your personal traits. Are you a polite person? Are you a talkative person? You are talking about the inner qualities of a person, right? So you may be a charismatic leader, but you have very bad behavior in the sense that you are very stingy, right? So this is an inner trait that is personal of you, right? This is referring to, like what I said just now, how you behave. So you may be someone that have good reputation, a politician, a good leader. However, you may be a mean person. So that is a distinction between character and disposition. Alright? Now when we talk about character here, so that's why, if you look at here, reputation is referring to what people sees of you, while disposition is how you behave. And when you talk about reputation here, it has to be accepted by the public or community. You're referring to something that has been settled, and compared to disposition, you're talking about the distinct personal character of you. That's why in the case of Bhagwan Swarup here, it was stated that a man may be reputed to be a good man, but in reality he may have bad disposition. So there's a distinction between reputation and disposition. Now, having said that, that is the definition or the scope of character evidence under Evidence Act within explanation to Section 55. The meaning of character, however, is different from the one that is used under the common law. Now, under the common law, character only reflects reputation of a person. So this is what example stated in the case of Aur and Rautan. What happened in the case is that you have a boy who has been assaulted, and the evidence that is standard by the boy is relating to the disposition that he believes the accused person have. So here the court says that it shouldn't fall under character evidence, therefore it shouldn't be relevant and admissible. So that is actually character, the definition of the scope of character evidence. Now, you have to remember that character evidence has to be distinguished with other relevancy provision that we have discussed before. Last time when we studied about, for example, similar facts evidence, we find that some students were very confused between similar facts evidence and character evidence. Now, what is similar facts evidence and how does it differ from character evidence? Now, when we look at similar facts evidence, similar facts evidence here is referring to evidence that you tender that have repetition. Say, for example, remember last semester we discussed similar facts evidence. It can be tendered under Evidence Act within Section 14 and 15. And similar facts evidence here is where if you have A here, the accused person, committing a crime against V1 at a different time and at a different place, and the same offense is committed against V2 and the same offense is committed against V3. All the offense was committed at a different time, at a different place, but the same modus operandi. Now, in this context, say for example here, A here is being charged for the offense made against V4. And the modus operandi of the offense committed against V1, V2, V3, and V4 are all the same. So the issue here, can you tender the evidence of V1, V2, and V3 here to prove that A committed the offense of V4? Remember, under similar facts evidence, you are talking about the circumstances as to how the crime committed. You are talking about the modus operandi. Now, V4, what happened to V4 here has nothing to do with what happened to V1, V2, and V3 because all happens at different time and it happens at different place. So this is where you are trying to tender evidence or as to what transpired against V1, V2, and V3 at different time and place to prove that he committed the offense against V4. So this is what it meant by similar facts evidence. To do that, the first one is that you must establish the link between the offense that happens to V4 here with the offense that is made against V1. So first of all, there must be a link that has been established. And this is a requirement of Section 5 of the Evidence Act to make evidence of V1, V2, and V3, to make what happened to V1, V2, and V3 here relevant to V4. And to do that, you have to apply the test of similar facts evidence, in which last semester we discovered there's a test under Makin. You have the specific categorization test. You have the test under Sims. That is the test of striking similarity. You also have the Boardman test, the probability value test. So here, you find that this is not character. You're not talking about character per se. You're not talking about reputation of the accused person. You're not talking about disposition of the accused person. But what you're talking here is that the modus operandi as to how the accused person commit the crime. Right? So that is actually the difference between character evidence and similar facts evidence. And that is actually what decided in the case of Tube Home Malaysia Sdn Bhd and Mood Publishing Malaysia, Mood Publishing Company Limited. Now, what happened in those cases? For example, in the case of Mood Publishing, what happened in Mood Publishing is that, so in Mood Publishing, they are trying to use similar facts evidence to reflect bad character. Now, what happened in Mood Publishing is that he has been committing breach of copyright. So he has committed, he is now, so you have the plaintiff here now charging him or suing him for breach of copyright. So you have breach number 1. The plaintiff here want to bring evidence of other breaches that have conducted, that is breach number 2 and breach number 3 that happened previously. Now the issue here, the reason why you are bringing in breach number 2 and breach number 3 to prove that the defendant here committed breach number 1 is to show that since you have been doing that before, so you are now doing it again. So this is what you use. This is a situation where you use similar facts evidence to tarnish the reputation of the defendant, right? So that is the position. For you to be able to do that, you have to accept the evidence and the similar facts evidence first. Meaning to say that breach number 2 and breach number 3 has to first linked or relevant to the current facts in issue, that is breach of copyright number 1, and only then it can be used to reflect character. So this is a situation where character evidence is proven, but it is proven indirectly by the use of similar facts evidence. Okay, so this is one link between character evidence and similar facts evidence. The second one here is to look at how character evidence reflect or link with other provisions of the law, and my notes here is reflecting on the link between character evidence with relevancy evidence that show motive. You have that in the case of Wong Po Hin. How will this do? If you recall the case of Wong Po Hin, the case of Wong Po Hin basically talk about, this is an accused person. He was charged for the murder of the daughter. Now, why that so? How does this incident happen? Now, prior to that, A was actually being caught by the wife raping the girl. So he has been assaulting the girl, and what the wife got to know about it, and what happened was the wife basically made a report to Orang Tua. Orang Tua is actually the leader. He is actually the leader of that longhouse. So when the wife reported it to Orang Tua called the accused person and basically make a threat to the accused person, saying that, well, if you do this again to your daughter, I'm going to report you to the police. Alright, so he then left the girl. He didn't do anything until maybe a few weeks later. He decided to rape her. So what happened here is that he called the girl to the room and raped her in the room. At that time, the wife was actually in the kitchen cooking. So the wife got to know that. So the girl screamed. During that incident, the girl screamed, and the wife got to know about it. And the wife came by and looked that he actually has raped the girl. So the wife left the house. So the wife left, and in the mind of the accused person, I believe that in the mind of the accused person, when the wife left the house, she could have reported the incident to Orang Tua. So I might be born again, and I might be charged. This incident will be reported by Orang Tua to the police. So what happened is that when the wife came home that night, the daughter and the accused person were not there. And later when the accused person came home, the daughter remains absent, meaning to say that the daughter was not home, and she was not home for the whole night. And the wife got worried and reported the matters, and the whole of Kampong here is go and search for her, and eventually the body of this particular girl was found thrown in a well about 1 mile away from the village, right? Now the issue here is whether the accused person here killed the daughter. Now in this case, the prosecutor handling the trial actually wished to tender the wife, wished to call the wife and orang tua as his prosecution witness. The reason why they want to call the wife and orang tua is that they want them to give evidence under Section 8, that is the fact that the accused person here has the motive to kill the girl. The prosecutor is aiming to say that, right, through the evidence of the wife and orang tua, the accused person here wanted to kill the girl, and he has a motive to kill the girl, that is to silence her, so that she will not going to report what happened, and then she will not going to go to court. So that's the idea. Now what happened in this case is that when the prosecutor tried to call these two persons to give evidence to show motive, the defense counsel argued that, so you have the defense counsel here, argue that, well, stop, you cannot give evidence, you cannot call this person, you cannot allow them to give evidence to show motive, because I'm relying on Section 54. Now what is Section 54? Section 54 subsection 1 says that in criminal proceedings, the fact that the accused person has a bad character is irrelevant. Now what the defense counsel is saying that I am going to use the shield under Section 54, which disallow any bad character evidence from being tendered as evidence in the court to show my guilt. So what happened here is that the defense is arguing that the moment you say that I have a motive to kill my daughter, then you are reflecting on my bad character. Because of that, I'm relying on Section 54. Now, what was decided by the court in this case is that if you have one provision allowing an evidence to be tendered, which is under motive here, you cannot use other provisions, that is Section 54, to disallow the evidence from being tendered. So here, even though there may be evidence of bad character indirectly shown by tendering the evidence of motive, the court says that it doesn't matter, it can be tendered as evidence to show motive. Alright? So here you'll find that indeed there is a relationship between evidence of motive, like in the case of Wong For Hing, with character evidence. And of course, when we discuss later, we will find that under bad character evidence cannot be tendered as a general rule. Okay? Now how about, so we are moving on. Here now we have understand what is character evidence, whether it can be used or not in cases. And now we are going to look at what is the position of character evidence in civil cases. Now when you look at the notes here, Section 52 provides you with the position of character evidence in civil cases. Also, there's another provision, that is Section 55, that also talk about character evidence in civil case. Now under Section 52, in civil cases, character to prove conduct imputed irrelevant. In civil cases, the fact that the character of any person concerned is such as to render probable or improbable any conduct imputed to him is irrelevant, except so far as his character appears from facts otherwise relevant. Now, Section 52 here is saying that general rule character evidence cannot be tendered, be it good or bad character, in civil cases, except that when the character is the facts an issue. So it means that issues of reputation or issues of reputation or disposition here is concerned with the matters that is of facts in issue, and look at Section 55, character as affecting damages in civil cases. The fact that the character of any person is such as to affect the amount of damages which he ought to receive is relevant. So section 55 also provides for character evidence in civil cases in which you are talking about character, because character here is affecting the amount of damages that you may get in your case. Yeah. Now, how will this be explained further? Now, when we talk about character evidence in civil cases, right? We are looking at first section 52. Section 52 says that character evidence as a general rule is not relevant. It will be relevant if it is a matter that relates to the facts and issue. When can character becomes the facts and issue? Yeah, this one we have studied in the law of tort when you have issues of defamation. So when you have issues of defamation, liability for defamation, and you are basically, if you studied defamation last time, the facts and issue here is whether the statement made injure the reputation, of the plaintiff. That is what liability in tort on defamation and libel is all about. So you're talking about, maybe here the defendant here is making a publication in the newspaper or making a statement in the newspaper saying that the plaintiff here is of a person of bad character, in the sense that have bad reputation, in the sense that he has been staying with a woman and he's not married to the woman. Yeah, he's not married. Therefore, he has an illegitimate child with this woman. Say, for example, the defendant here made a statement in the newspaper relating the plaintiff. Now, the plaintiff here can sue the defendant on the grounds that the defendant here injure his reputation. Yeah. So if the plaintiff here is someone that is reputable, that someone maybe in the eyes of the public that is a religious person, the moment that you say that he is keeping a woman and has a illegitimate child, the defendant here is basically injuring the reputation. So this is directly affected, these issues of reputation directly affected the plaintiff, and it is the facts and issue in this case. That's why under section 52 here, the moment you're talking about issues of reputation, disposition, you're injuring the character, it goes to the roots of the facts and issue, and that is the element that you got to prove in the court whether your statement here is actually injuring the reputation of the accused person. So that is actually the one that directly relates to the facts and issue. So that is what it meant by section 52. Another one will be under section 54, is where you are looking at the character when you assess the damages. Yeah, right. Say this one, you have the case of Sanderson. You can apply Sanderson here. You can apply Sanderson also in section 52, because the case of Sanderson here is referring to a person who is a foreigner working at the rubber replanting board. He was alleged to have received bribe. So what happened here is that the newspaper company published an article saying that he packed off for corruption. He is basically, so he's an expatriate. Yeah, the headline indicates that he is a person who commit corruption and therefore asked to leave because of corruption. So what happened here, Sanderson is actually suing the company, the newspaper company, Malaya Times, for that statement that is made in the newspaper. And this Sanderson here is taking an action again for defamation. Now in this case, right, indeed the statement made by the newspaper here affect the reputation of the accused person, and in this case, of course, he has been investigated for defamation. He has been investigated for this, for corruption, Sanderson. So what happened here is that, so he sued for defamation, and because because there was actually an allegation of corruption, and there have been evidence of the accused the plaintiff misconduct or misuse of power here, right? So what happened in this situation here is that there is incident of defamation, right? Even though there may be some kind of maybe the allegation is true, it may be true, whether it's true or not, it has to be proven in the defamation suit. But the point that we are looking here is actually when you talk about Sanderson case, because there could be a possibility that the report is true, what happened here is that when the court assessed the damages to be given to Sanderson, at the end of the day, the court only gave him 1 ringgit, because the court finds that, right, the court finds that it does not basically affects you so much. Yeah, so this is where you use section 55 to assess the damages. Yeah, this is also basically the situation in the case of Henry Wong, and you can also reflect the case of D.P. Vijayendran and Karpal Singh, whereby in D.P. Vijayendran and Karpal Singh, basically what happened in the assessment of appropriate damages, the court basically look at the situation, the court look at the character, the court look at the fact that Karpal Singh was actually a politician and using his best to injure the character of D.P. Vijayendran. So even though it is true that in the civil action there was defamation, but the assessment of defamation was actually looking into the character of the persons, and it was given lesser than what asked. Yeah, so that is actually the use of character evidence in civil cases. So for this lecture, I have discussed with you the meaning of character evidence, and we also have discussed about character evidence in civil cases, right? So this is all for this lecture. In the next lecture, we are going on to look at character evidence in criminal cases.